G'day, welcome back to the Art Gallery, and it's time for another rant. Yes, today I'm ranting about a couple of things. First of all, Google wants our airspace. What's our airspace? Well, I'm talking about the piece of air between 0, that's ground level, and 400 feet. Now, to date, over many decades, that's really been the domain of model aircraft. We've used that space because no one else wants it. It's too dangerous to have men in aeroplanes flying around that low to the ground, and there's really nothing else that could be done with it. So we were given it, basically, by default. They said, well, you can fly there, no worries. Don't go over 400 feet, too dangerous. There's manned aircraft up there. So for many decades, that's exactly what we've done. We have flown between 0 and 400 feet safely, without problems, without incident, and everyone's been happy. And then, of course, drones came along. And people said, what do we do with these drones? I know, let's let them use that space too. So there's been model aircraft, there's been drones under 400 feet. Everybody's happy, but now Alphabet, the parent company of Google, one of the largest corporations in the world, along with Amazon and Ford Motor Company and a lot of others, have decided we want that space. So we're big companies, we're big corporations, we want to have that space for our drones, our delivery drones, our whatever drones, surveying drones, anything we want to do, we want that space because now that's really valuable. So in America, the airspace, under 400 feet, the model flyers' rights to use that have been protected by Section 336 of something or other, known as Section 336. This is a piece of legislation from the Congress or whatever. They said that so long as model flyers adhere to the rules and the guidelines of a community-based organisation, which in this case is generally perceived to be the AMA, then they will be exempt from further regulation by the FAA. Now, that was tested. It was tested very recently when the FAA tried to force registration on model flyers, okay? And initially, they got the right to do that. Then a guy called John Taylor came along and he said, no, you can't do that. It's a breach of Section 336. And it went to court and John won. So all the registrations were rescinded. But then the FAA went back to Congress and said, no, we must have these registrations. So you still have to register in the USA. It's just a dog's breakfast over there. Anyway, but there are other special benefits that result from Section 336 in America. And Google, Amazon, all the others, they want to rescind that special protection that Congress has given to model flying when operated under the umbrella of a community-based organisation. They're saying model flyers and recreational drone operators should be bound by the same rules, regulations and restrictions that commercial operators are. And that really, I don't like that. I don't think that's good because you can see it's a land grab. It's an air grab. All these corporations want access to the stuff and they don't want to have to deal with kids flying their toy planes in the parks, with model flyers flying their planes out in the country at prescribed model flying airfields, and drone operators, recreational drone operators trying to get lovely pictures of landscape. No, they don't want them there because they get in the way of the commercial drones, the ones that are earning money for these huge corporations. So they are lobbying at the moment to basically toss out Section 336 to say that model flyers have no special privileges. Doesn't matter that we've been using this airspace for ages and we've been responsible users of the airspace. Nope, when it comes down to the almighty dollar, we just don't have a chance. And the problem we've got is there is no representation. There's the AMA in America, but look, they couldn't even stop the FAA from introducing registration the first time. It took one individual to challenge them and get it thrown out. AMA was saying, oh no, we're cozying up to politicians, we're lobbying, we're doing our job. No, they were so stupid as to believe the assurances given to them by politicians, yet we all know that politicians will tell you what you want to hear to your face and do what they want to do behind your back. And then they'll kick your dog for good measure. It's not good enough. So that's the problem we have now. We're going to have to fight for our airspace. If we want to retain the right to fly our models, as we have done in the past, we need to actually get organised, we need to start lobbying ourselves, and we need to raise some really good reasons why we shouldn't just be handing it over to the big corporations so they can make a fistful of money out of it, because that's what's going to happen otherwise. And while on the subject of all this corporate management of the airspace, I see in France there's been a suggestion that all drones weighing over roughly 1.5 pounds, I think, should have electronic conspicuity devices fitted to them. Conspicuity? Yeah, no, basically it just means a beacon of some kind that broadcasts their identification. It comes from being conspicuous in electronic. So electronic conspicuity means having a device on board that makes you conspicuous. So that the theory behind this is that if there is a drone somewhere, a police officer or an enforcement officer can walk up, pull out their little thing, read the code being broadcast by that drone, then basically look it up on their database, say, that's Bill Smith from number 31 down the road, let's go and kick his dog because he's flying a drone in a public place, and that's what it's for. The other side effect, the other beneficial effect we're being told is that if all these drones are broadcasting not only their ID but their location, then we can run a fully automated UTM, an unmanned traffic management system, and that will enable us to do air traffic control so that drones don't bang into each other, and Google and Amazon and all the others can weave their way through the cloud of recreational drone flyers without causing any problems. So again, it's looking like they're going to demand that if your drone, and remember, for regulators, a drone is everything that flies, isn't it? Your quarter-scale Spitfire with the 50cc gas motor in it, that's a drone, so you'll have to have electronic conspicuity in that if it goes ahead. This is a French initiative, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen all over the world. You'll have to have a little transponder in your plane that will broadcast its position and what it is. So if you fly outside the prescribed area, you probably automate the infringement notice, then you get a fine in the mail. You flew 5 meters outside your prescribed model flying area, and therefore you're fined €500 or $1,000 or whatever it happens to be at the time. We are such villainous people, we need to be treated this way. And of course, if the big corporations are going to own that sub 400 foot, then we're going to have this electronic control system so that we can make sure everyone's playing properly and they can make sure we're not interfering with their ability to make huge amounts of money out of that airspace. Now back to the issue of the New Zealand investigative journalist whose aircraft was knocked out of the sky by a drone. I spoke about this last time, and things have come to light since then. Now, this will shock you, but when the Civil Aviation Authority investigated the crash, their preliminary investigation, they found no sign of a drone. So it must have been a drone. They checked the plane, no signs of a drone, no signs of impact with a drone, no bits of drone. I don't think any of us are really surprised by that, but it gets better. Another journalist wrote a follow-up piece in which they interviewed this guy and talked about his crash, and it turns out that pieces of the windscreen from that aircraft were found 200 metres from the local fire station on the ground, sprinkled across the ground. So the windscreen shattered for whatever reason, and the bits fell on the ground in a small area near town. But there was no signs of any bits of drone, no broken propellers, no broken arms, no batteries, nothing to indicate there was a drone involved. Yet all the little pieces of polycarbonate or Lexan were found neatly spread around this area. So it sort of indicates that perhaps it wasn't a drone. But wait, there's more. When they interviewed this journalist again, he said, it couldn't possibly be a spontaneous material failure. The windscreen couldn't have just blown up by itself. He said, because there's only been 5 instances of that in the past. 5. So it's happened 5 times before. And he said, no, it couldn't have been that. Well, excuse me, but that means it's not unprecedented. And in fact, it's not that uncommon. The windscreens can spontaneously fail. And there's, as I say, there's no evidence whatsoever we're talking about a drone. But it can't possibly be a spontaneous material failure because that's only happened 5 times before. Never had a drone, so it must be a drone. So I actually wrote to this journalist to ask, why did you not do your job and actually point out the huge holes in what this guy's saying? Do some investigation. She came back at me and accused me of cherry picking my facts. Well, no, I just quoted what she said in the article. How am I cherry picking my facts? In fact, they were the only facts in the damn article, and I don't think this journalist would recognise it if a fact came up and bit her on the arse. There's no journalists in New Zealand. She calls herself a journalist. No, she's not. She would have investigated it. And that brings me to another example of just how bad our media is here in New Zealand. It turns out that when a Boeing 777 flew or claimed to have seen a drone flying into Auckland International Airport nearly 3 weeks ago. There was all sorts of hue and cry, and there's big articles in the media, and apparently the drone flew within 5 meters of the aircraft, and the pilot thought it might have gone through the engine, and it was terrible. So many people could have died. Yet surprisingly enough, although they claimed there was a drone out there in close proximity to the international airport, nobody called the police. Nobody called CAA. And the local media didn't pick up on this. They didn't do any investigation whatsoever. They just wrote it down the unverified reports as fact. That's what they do in New Zealand. It took the International Associated Press to actually do some digging and discover that the police hadn't been called. Now you would think that if there's a drone out there posing a menace to international air traffic, the first thing you do is call the police to go out and see if they can find who's doing it and arrest them. But no, they didn't even call the police. So again, this speaks to my strong feeling that there's some porky pies being told out here. We have no independent verification of these sightings, and they don't want the police involved, because if the police did go out to where the drone was reportedly flying and they couldn't find the drone and they couldn't find the person operating the drone, then it kind of speaks to the veracity of the claims being made by the pilots. And they didn't want that. So no, don't call the authorities. Let's just sit here and tremble and talk to the media. Not good enough. And it shows you our media, there's no journalists. They would have investigated. It took the International Associated Press to actually start digging and discover things that we really should have known right from the get-go. And while I'm busy thrashing the media because they deserve it, there was another story here in New Zealand. Apparently a woman went out and her son went outside to see a drone hovering 1 metre over their backyard, and the boy was terrified. In fact, the boy was so terrified that he couldn't sleep that night because he was afraid the drone might come back. Now, excuse me, but why was the boy terrified? Who's been telling this boy that these drones are so dangerous and evil? Well, the media has, hasn't it? Well, the media's been telling his parents, and his parents have been telling the boy. Unbelievable. And the mother of this boy said, if it comes back, I'm going to get my air rifle and I'm going to shoot it. Yet you would think if the drone was hovering 1 metre above the backyard, now 1 metre, that's hip high, right? That's 1 metre above the backyard. She could have grabbed a broom and just given it a whack, right? And that would have knocked it out of the sky. Why would you need an air rifle if it's just 1 metre? It's like none of this gels. No one's challenging the people reporting this stuff and asking these questions, because that would detract from the sensationalism of the story. Yes, you don't want to poke holes in people's obviously flawed reports, because then there's no story. But that's the way our media works. And finally, in today's rant from the art gallery, I want to talk about my own situation here in Tokoroa. Now, the mayor has just come out and issued a decree, no, a diktat, that nobody may fly their drones in the parks without special permission. Well, hang on a minute. Whoa, let's rewind things a little. Up until just before Christmas, those were the rules in this town. You couldn't fly drones in the parks without special permission, and so most people just couldn't fly drones in the parks. However, we had a review of our bylaws, and one of those bylaws was the public places bylaw, in which they wanted to introduce a complete and total ban, so you wouldn't even be able to get permission. And I lobbied against that. More than 20 other people in the community filed submissions saying, no, we should be allowed to fly our drones in the parks. The people down the road, just 20 minutes down the road, can fly their drones in the parks. The people 10 minutes further can fly their drones in the parks. They're all administered by the same council. So what's so special about Tokoroa that we can't fly our drones in our parks, apart from the fact that Mr. Simpson lives there and the council hates his guts? More on that. So we had a review of the bylaw, and the council listened to all these public submissions and my own submission, and the councillors in our council agreed that it was the intention of council that people should be able to fly their toys and drones in the parks without fear of prosecution. They expressed that intention to me, and I passed it on to the community, and the mayor agreed, and everything was happy. In fact, the mayor even drew the winner of a prize for me from where I offered a drone to people, and she drew the prize winner out of a bucket. Fantastic. And she remarked how this would be a great drone for her son. She was all over the moon. Drones are great, drones are wonderful, blah, blah, blah. You fly your drones in the park, fine. And so for nearly 5 months, from mid-December through till now, mid-April, people have been able to fly their drones and toys in our parks here in Tokoroa. And they have done so. I've done it. I've seen young kids flying their toy drones and helicopters. I've seen Phantoms flying in the park. I've seen Mavics flying in the park. No problems. So in 5 months, we've proven that the claims made by myself and other members of the public that drones were not a danger, they were not an annoyance, they posed no risk to the public, and that they could be flown in our parks without problems appeared to be true. And 5 months of evidence to back up the claims. And just to make sure, I filed an official information request with the council asking for copies of any and all reports or complaints, any and all incidents, any and all accidents, any and all injuries that might have been resulting from drone use in the parks. Not one. Nobody had complained. Nobody was concerned. There'd been no accidents, no injuries, no incidents whatsoever. Perfect track record for the last 5 months. So you would think that the mayor, who was all pro-drone and drone-friendly, would be thinking, I've done the right thing. But no, she turned around overnight, unilaterally, without consulting the community, without consulting even her fellow councillors who had all agreed on this, and said, no more drone flying in our parks without special permission. Is that like... Hitler would be proud. Honestly, Stalin would be proud. This woman, just off her own bat without consultation, thumbed her nose at the community and thumbed her nose at her fellow councillors by issuing a diktat that reversed the permissions that had been given, even though there was no just reason to do so. That's what I have to deal with in this town. The rules of common sense and democracy don't count for a bean here. Facts don't count for anything. It's just whatever the whim of the mayor is on the day, that's what happens. That's very much what appears to be the case. And explain to me what's going on. Now, there's only one explanation I can possibly think of to explain what's going on here. Excuse my confusion. There's only one reason I can think of that she did this. A couple of weeks ago, I raised some important issues in the public forum about what the council was doing. They're going to raise their local taxes here by up to 67%. Nobody knew that. I read it on the council's website and mentioned it to some people, and suddenly I'm a bad person. I got a message from the mayor saying, where did you get this information? And I pointed it to her own council's website where it had been published, perhaps mistakenly by her staff. But it was published. It was in the public domain. I simply told some other people, but that made me a bad person. And then there was an issue where the council have employed someone from overseas to fill a job that could have been filled locally by local people who the council is here to support. That did not go down well with the mayor. She was outraged that I had dared to bring up this fact, and that it had upset the people of the community who expected to be given first option when jobs were going. So again, I was a bad person because I'd done my job as a member of the community to raise issues that affect the rest of the community. All I can think of is that now that she's become really angry at me, the only way she can think of to get back at me is to ban drone flying in the parks, because that has been my little hobby horse. That has been something that I've promoted and worked very hard to get past. And now she thinks the only way I can deal with him, I'll teach him, I'll ban drone flying in the parks again. So it smacks of a personal petty vendetta. That's not professional. We expect better than that from people who are supposed to be the head of our civic governance, not someone who just gets their nose out of joint and says, I'll fix you. That's unbelievable. But it speaks to the professionalism of the mayor, and also her honesty. She promised us that we could fly our drones in the park without fear of prosecution. Now she turns around and says, if you don't get special permission, we will take action. So she lied to us. Unbelievable. This is what I've got to deal with. Interesting comparison between this situation and the one in Ballarat. Now, Ballarat in Australia is a town, and their council had also banned drone flying. But they lobbied the council, they made representations, and they argued pretty much the same things I did, that drones were not a nuisance and drones were not a threat. And as such, you can't make a bylaw to prevent their operation. They also argued, as I did, that why would the council take on the costs and time involved in administering and regulating drones when the Central Aviation Authority, in the case of New Zealand CAA and in the case of Australia CASA, when these authorities have already regulated them and they already have rules in place? Why would a council bother doubling up on that? Leave the job of regulating drones and enforcing their use to the government agency that's already set up and funded to do so. Don't reinvent the wheel. Those were my arguments to the council, and they were taken on board initially by the councillors. In Ballarat, the council said, yeah, that's dead right. Okay, fair enough. Fly your drones. We've got no problems. Just make sure you follow the CASA rules. Why couldn't our council do that? Well, initially they did do that, but then the mayor turned around and completely changed everything because she got her nose out of joint, got her knickers in a bunch because I had told some people some of the facts that I'd found on the council's own website. Oh, there you go. So it's kind of frustrating for me because as most people know, I've got Parkinson's and I have good days and bad days. On the good days, I just love to take half an hour, jump across the fence into the park and fly my mini quad around through the trees, not racing, not fast, just nice and slow, just enjoying the experience. You know, I'm not a risk to anyone. I make sure I'm not flying near people. I make sure that it's a time of day when the park's virtually deserted, and so I'm not a risk. I'm not an annoyance. No one's ever complained. In fact, people come up and say, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I show them. It's great. It's fantastic. Now, That's a fantastic release for me, and just enables me to, as it is for a lot of people. I've spoken to a lot of people who fly mini quads, and it's a cathartic, it's a release, it's just a wind down at the end of the day. I've really enjoyed that. Now, can't do that. They've taken it from me because the mayor's got her panties in a bunch over certain things. It's unbelievable. And so why am I still here in Tokoroa? Why am I one of the leading proponents of this hobby and leading supporters of this hobby? Why am I stuck in a town where if you open the doors to council, all you can hear a dueling banjo, the theme from Deliverance. And if you get on the wrong side of council, you'll probably find that you and your car will be buried in a swamp down the back 40 within half an hour. It's like, that's as bad. It's honestly, it's almost that bad. It really is. I despair. But I can't afford to move anywhere else, much as I'd like to, so I'm stuck here. And I just have to make the most of it. So there's my rant, another horrible rant from the art gallery for another however long it takes me to come up with the next rant. So there you go. I'd like you all to comment, please, on the issues I've raised today. How are we going to counter the threat that the big corporations pose to our use of the airspace that we've had for so long? Should we all be fitting electronic conspicuity devices to our model aircraft so that we can be managed by Google and Amazon and all the others that are going to be making use of this airspace? What can we do about the media and the fact that they actually scare children to the extent that that this kid could not sleep for fear a drone might come back into his backyard? And what do we do about a media that doesn't even investigate the facts? And when presented with the fact they don't investigate with the facts, call people like myself cherry pickers. We cherry pick the facts. It beggars belief, honestly it does. So we need to come up with some strategies. I'd like to see a global body formed to represent all model and drone flyers. Because as it stands, we're divided. The biggest organisation is probably the AMA, a couple of 100,000 people. It's nothing. Worldwide, there must be over 1 million people who fly model aircraft and drones. Probably a couple of million people if you include the drone flyers. If we can get together, if we can speak with a unified voice, if we can have a union of model flyers and drone operators, then we get some traction with governments. If we don't do that, the Googles, the Amazons, the Ford Motor Companies, they're going to walk all over us. In 5 years' time, we'll be flying indoors and just grateful we can do that. Honestly, it really may be that bad. Trust me, the way the media is going, if you go outside with a drone, you'll get shot by a member of the public just protecting themselves. It is almost that bad. There you go. Thanks for listening, if you're still listening. Oh, is there anyone? I can't tell. Anyway, and tell me what you think of the artwork in today's rant. I've got plenty more here we can put up. But now it's time for me to have a coffee and go to bed. Thanks. See you later, guys. Comments. Thumbs up if you like the video. Thumbs down if you don't. If you don't care, I don't care. But just have your say. See ya.